clear. Okay, then I hope these questions were informative as well as helping in revision. Yes, people, were these questions informative and helping in revision? Okay. Right. So tomorrow I will be asking about 5 questions in TCP IP and 5 questions in ARM. So prepare for them. 5 questions in TCP IP, 5 questions in ARM. No, not like that. Sorry. 5 questions in TCP IP, about 3 questions in ARM and 2 questions in I2C protocol. So be prepared for them tomorrow. And this is the pattern I'll be following in the coming tests onwards. 5 questions in TCP and 3 questions in ARM, 2 questions in I2C until further notice or until further any discussion I give. Okay, so I'm beginning with the class. Just a moment. Okay, is the slide visible to you, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have learned about a few features of the ARM 7 RISC architecture. Now I would like to discuss a few points which is trying to differentiate between an ARMS being a pure RISC, not a pure RISC, and what we call a pure RISC. So ARM is an advanced RISC architecture and it's not a normal RISC architecture or a pure RISC architecture. So what are the deviations of the ARM advanced RISC architecture? What are the deviations of the ARM advanced RISC architecture from a supposed pure RISC architecture are as follows. A pure RISC architecture is expected to have all instructions completed in a single cycle of execution. All instructions should take a single cycle of execution. This is what is a pure RISC architecture. But practically speaking, there is no pure RISC. So ideal RISC or pure RISC is a RISC architecture where all instructions should take 1 clock cycle per execution. But practically speaking, we do not have a pure RISC or ideal RISC. You can say around 95 to 97% of instructions in a RISC architecture will take 1 clock cycle for execution, except for maybe about 2 to 5% of instructions will take slightly more than one clock cycle for execution. So practically could not be designed that all instructions can complete in a one clock cycle. So 95 to 97% of the instructions will be completing in one clock cycle, except for a few. Now, ARM being an advanced RISC architecture, this ratio or this percentage of instructions which will be taking more clock cycles for execution as compared to less number of as compared to the less number of instructions present in a pure RISC. In advanced RISC architecture, this percentage is more. So the advanced RISC architecture has more instructions which take variable cycle execution. Okay, this is one of the deviations from a pure RISC architecture, or what you say close to pure RISC architecture. Next, you have a concept called as inline barrel shifter. So there is a hardware unit present in the ARM architecture that is called as inline barrel shifter. Barrel shifter is just a barrel. The word barrel is just a name. Okay, there's nothing so fancy about it. It's just a shifter, in other words. So in any CPU, you will be having a shifting logic, or shifter we call it. So it's just given a name as a barrel shifter. There is nothing so unique about its name, barrel. So the inline barrel shifter, or simply a shifter present in the ARM, is what helps in speeding up the processing of operations in the ARM instructions. So an inline barrel shifter, or simply a shifter, is a unit which pre-processes information present in a register before it is applied to arithmetic logic unit. I repeat, the inline barrel shifter, or simply a shifter in ARM architecture, is a hardware unit which pre-processes information present in a register. Pre-processes means it performs a left shift or a right shift, or rotate, or left rotate or right rotate, this kind of operations. It performs these kind of operations within the same clock cycle of execution. So that is basically what is the inline barrel shifter. I'm further trying to explain the inline barrel shifter with the example right now. So just please look at this example. Take a couple of minutes to look at this example. You can see here right now, in this example, you are making use of an instruction called as these instructions that you see here are instructions of 8051 architecture. And what I'm doing here in this instructions, I'm taking first a content of the R0, R1, R7 register, moving a copy of that into accumulator, clearing the carry flag, then rotating left through carry the content of the accumulator, again clearing the carry flag, rotating the content of the accumulator left, that is rotate left through carry accumulator, again clearing the carry flag, rotating left through carry accumulator, again clearing the carry flag, rotating left through accumulator, carry flag. Then after the four sets of statements for clear and rotate, next whatever is the resulting value in the accumulator, that is being added to the register R6 value, and the final result of addition is getting updated in R5. So in other words, what we are doing here is we're taking a content of R7, shifting it about 4 times towards the left, and after shifting it, whatever is the result of the shift operation is being added to the content of R6 register, and finally that content of R6 register is being updated or moved or stored in R5 register. This is what is happening in this particular set of instructions. Okay, this is what's happening in this particular set of instructions. Is this understood, please? Please confirm whether this set of statements have been understood. Please confirm whether this set of statements have been understood. Once again, okay, I am taking the content of R7 register into accumulator, clearing the carry flag, rotate left to carry accumulator. That means I am shifting one position left, the content of accumulator. Then again I am shifting one position left, the updated value in the accumulator. Again I am shifting one position left, updated value in the accumulator. Then I'm again shifting one position left, updated value in the accumulator. So this shifting one position left is accomplished using the two instructions, clear carry flag and rotate left through carry accumulator. The use of these two instructions is performing one left shift operation. And after I'm performing this left shift operation 4 times, the result of the value after 4 left shifts, which is stored in accumulator, is being added to the content of R6 register, and that result of addition is getting stored or updated or moved into R5 register. This is a kind of activity happening in 8051. Is this understood? Please let me know. Okay, if it is understood now, you can see the total number of instructions to accomplish these set of operations is about 11 instructions, and considering the time of execution for all these instructions is 1 machine cycle. Considering the time of execution, the time of all these instructions is 1 machine cycle. 1 machine cycle for all these for each of these instructions. So total, this activity is taking 12 machine cycles. Let's take the case where a CPU is having 1 machine cycle is equal to 12 oscillator clock cycles. So the total time taken to complete this execution, because in a machine cycle there will be, let us say, 1 cycle at least, which will be used for execution purpose, executing this instruction. Fetch, a machine cycle comprises of fetch, decode and execute. So considering just the execution cycle, let's say about 1 clock cycle, so this activity is taking about 12 clock cycles to complete the operation of execution of these instructions. Are you following what I have said? Now, the same activity which has been given on the left hand side can also be accomplished by these set of instructions given on the right hand side. Okay, this activity which has been given on the left hand side can also be accomplished in this way. What I am doing is I am taking the content of R7 register, moving it into accumulator, a copy, then moving a value of 16 into B register. Then left shift is the same thing as about multiplication. So I'm multiplying what we call the content of A with 16, because when I left shift 4 times, it will be equivalent to multiplying 2 power 4, 2 power number of shifts. Since number of shifts are 4, so 2 power 4 is 16. So the value of accumulator is being multiplied with the value of B, which contains 16, and the result stored in accumulator is being added to R6 register, and finally the result of addition is getting updated into R5. So the set of operations given on left hand side can also be realized using these set of instructions. But here the size, the number of instructions are reduced to 5 instructions, and the what we call the size here is different. So move B comma 16 is taking about 3 bytes. So total size of the program is giving, I think, around 7 bytes. And the time taken here is taking about 9 machine cycles, or 9. If I take 1 machine cycle as 1 clock cycle, it will be taking around 9 clock cycles. So here 11 clock cycles are taken to complete the activity and 11 bytes are taken to complete this activity. Here in the second case, 7 bytes are taken for the size of the program, and 9 bytes are taken for the what we call operation to complete. Now these are two ways of writing the same operation. These are two ways of writing the same operation, but this same operation in ARM can be accomplished using a single instruction which has been given below. I have not taught you instruction sets yet. You will come to know about instructions. I will be teaching about the instructions, not to worry, but just because the concept has come and you are already aware of assembly language programming, so I am trying to just put it here. So the two ways of operations which were used to accomplish the shifting of a register value and adding it to another register and storing it into another register is accomplished in a single instruction in ARM as follows. You can see here. So R7 is a register with whose copy will be taken into the barrel shifter, and it will be LSL, means logical shift left by 4. So what is the value in R7 will be taken into the barrel shifter. It will be left shifted by 4, and what is the result of the left shift by 4 will be added to R6 register, and after it is added to R6 register, the result of the addition is getting updated into R5 register. So this entire set of activities is completed in a single instruction. So this is the power and capability of the ARM architecture. It can accomplish shift operations and additions operations as well as the final storage operation right now. So basically here shift and addition is taking place in the same instruction, whereas in the previous case shifting was being done by some set of instructions, addition was being done by some set of instructions, but right now shifting and addition is being done by both the same instruction, and the result is getting updated in another location, so storing the result somewhere else. So shifting, addition and storage of operation all is completed in a single instruction right now. This feature which I'm discussing, this thing which I'm saying is possible. It is possible because of the presence of the hardware unit called as inline barrel shifter. Because of the hardware unit inline barrel shifter, it has been designed in such a way that the ARM core can accomplish a left shift or right shift or left rotate or right rotate in the same clock cycle of execution of an instruction in ARM. So we don't need to go for a separate instruction for left shift or right shift or left rotate or right rotate. You can accomplish it in the same instruction along with another arithmetic logic unit. So here it's a shift operation along with addition. Two separate types of operations have been merged into a single instruction. We can also call this as instruction fusion. We can also call it as instruction fusion because shift operation is a type of instruction and addition operation is another type of instructions. Both shift operation and addition operation have been clubbed or merged into the same instruction. So we can call this example of instruction as a fused instruction, an instruction comprising of two types of operations. So this instruction, which is comprising of two types of operation in the same instruction itself, the size of this instruction is 4 bytes because all instructions in ARM 32-bit is 4 bytes, and the time taken to complete this operation is 1 clock cycle for execution. Of course, fetch will take 1 clock cycle, decode will take 1 clock cycle because 3-stage pipeline. Fetch takes 1 clock cycle, decode takes 1 clock cycle, execution of this operation takes 1 clock cycle. So the effective time for execution is 1 clock cycle. but the total time for the instruction is 3 clock cycles. 1 clock cycle for fetch, 1 clock cycle for decode, 1 clock cycle for execution. Okay, guys, did you understand this? Please again look at it, and if you have any doubts, you can try to shower your doubts, and I will try to answer them. Please look at the codes and try to shower your doubts, and I'll try to answer them regarding this discussion. So this discussion is talking about a concept called as inline barrel shifter, which is a variation in the advanced RISC architecture, which is not present in a normal RISC architecture. Any doubts, people, regarding this discussion? Queries, please ask. Am I going at a comfortable pace for you to understand and absorb? Okay. Any queries? Can I go ahead now? Okay, I'm going ahead then. The size of the instruction is 4 bytes, 32 bits. The size of the instruction is 4 bytes because ARM architecture supports 2 types of instructions, 2 categories of instructions, 32-bit instructions, which is 4 bytes wide, and 16-bit instructions, which is 2 bytes wide. So 32-bit instructions are called as ARM instructions, ARM instruction set or ARM instruction, and 16-bit instructions are called as thumb instructions. Okay, HE7 and 6, right. So that was about the concept of inline barrel shifter. So the presence of the hardware unit called as inline barrel shifter helps us to perform left shift, left rotate, right rotate in the same clock cycle of execution and speed up the operations. So that one instruction which is taking 4 bytes to in terms of size is taking 1 clock cycle for execution, whereas that same operation in 8051 was either taking 11 clock cycles for execution or else it was taking about 9 clock cycles for execution. So where 1 clock cycle and where it is 11 clock cycles or 9 clock cycles. So you can see how much performance the ARM processor core or the ARM processor is giving as compared to the 8051 architecture. Okay, next, the presence of a separate instruction set, which is called as thumb instruction set, is also a deviation from what we call a normal RISC or a pure RISC, because normal RISC or pure RISC only have one instruction set. But ARM, being an advanced RISC architecture, has been designed to have 2 instruction set. One is called as the ARM instruction set, which is 32-bit instruction set, and the other one is called as thumb instruction set, which is 16-bit instruction. So the presence of 2 instruction sets, or if you go to the higher versions of ARM core, you will also have more instruction set other than 2 instruction set. So you will have ARM instruction set, you will have thumb instruction set, you will have instruction set for what we call digital signal processing or digital image processing. You will also have instruction set for what we call another type of instruction called as thumb 2 instruction set. So ARM right now, ARM 7, which we have discussed, is a deviation from the pure RISC because it contains an extra instruction set other than already one instruction set. So this is a deviation from pure RISC. Next, normal RISC or pure RISC do not support conditional execution of instructions. What is conditional execution of instructions? I have discussed the other day that instructions can pass off as no operations and thus save time in terms of flushing out the unwanted instructions and then bringing in the wanted instructions. So when we can avoid the flushing out of unwanted instructions and bringing in then instructions which have to execute, we have to go for what we call the flushing out operations. V means the machine will go out for flushing out operations. So that flushing out of operations has been can be eliminated or can be avoided by the use of conditional execution. So it's a choice. We programmers have a choice. I can go for conditional execution. I can also go for without conditional execution. So I have a choice. The ARM advanced RISC architecture is having a choice that you can go for conditional execution, which will give you better throughput, or else if it is not necessary, you can go for normal execution without conditional execution. So normal execution is anyway definitely supported. Additionally, the ARM core supports conditional execution, which is a deviation from a pure RISC. Next, apart from that, the support of extra instruction sets for digital signal processing or digital image processing is also supported by the ARM architecture. So this is also a deviation from a pure RISC. A pure RISC does not have these level of instructions. It will have the bare minimum set of instructions to accomplish computational operations. But ARM is a kind of RISC architecture which has the bare minimum set of instructions. Apart from the bare minimum set of instructions, it also has some extra instructions which help it to stand apart in the world of embedded systems, in the world of CPUs for embedded systems. So the presence of enhanced digital signal processing level instructions will be helpful in DSP or DIP related applications. Coming to the last point, the ARM architecture supports JESL support. So what is meant by the term JESL? Let me try to explain. The term JESL implies that if we take a desktop computer running Microsoft OS, or if I take a desktop computer running Linux OS, if I want to execute a Java application in this environment of Windows operating system or Linux operating system, what we need to do is we need to install a software called as JVM. I need to install a software called as the Java compiler. So when I install the Java compiler as well as the JVM, the Java compiler compiles a Java source code and gives us a Java executable file. This Java executable file can run on a Windows platform or Linux platform comfortably. It can also run on an Android platform. So whenever this Java executable file is able to run on Windows or Linux or Java, it means that the Java executable file has been designed to be platform independent executable file. Means irrespective of any platform, let it be Windows platform or Windows OS. Platform here means operating system. Let it be Windows operating system, or let it be Linux operating system, let it be Android operating system, whatever operating system, the Java executable file can be made to run on that operating system environment, provided that that operating system environment is preloaded with a tool called as a JVM. JVM stands for Java Virtual Machine. So it is basically an interpreter. The JVM is an interpreter which converts the executable file of the Java, which contains Java bytecodes, into platform specific executable statements. So a certain Java executable file contains Java bytecodes. Each bytecode will be interpreted by the JVM of the respective platform and tell the JVM of the respective platform, as per this Java statement, you should perform so and so operations in the Windows environment, or as per this Java statement, you should perform so and so operations in the Linux environment, or as per this Java platform, you should perform so and so operations in the Android environment. I hope you guys are following. So this type of support, where an operating system now can execute Java based applications, is a normal thing. Now ARM architecture, when it wants to execute Java executable file, it also needs to be preloaded with the JVM. But the difference between the JVM on a desktop computer and the JVM on an ARM computer or ARM CPU is the JVM on a different target CPU such as different CPU such as x86 CPU. The JVM such as on x86 CPU is a complete 100% software. The JVM on x86 CPU is complete 100% software. In contrast, the JVM on an ARM is 70% of the JVM is already implemented in a hardware logic of ARM. That is what we mean by Jezzel support. So 70% of the Java bytecodes, which have some common meaning, are already being interpreted in the hardware logic of what we call the ARM architecture. Remaining 30% of the JVM need to be implemented by software because these things will vary from one. These things will vary from one. What do you say? 70% of the JVM Java bytecodes is already implemented in the form of a hardware. 30% of the JVM has to be implemented in the form of a software in ARM because this varies from one type of IO operations being performed in an embedded system using ARM to another type of IO operations being performed in another embedded system again using ARM to another type of IO operations being performed by another embedded system on ARM. So different embedded systems using ARM will have probably some different input and output devices. So based on that, the JVM has to be modified as per their specifications. Hence, that 30% of the modifications in JVM will be changing from one device to another device, but the 70% of the JVM need not change. So a software need not be developed for that JVM, but that JVM can be interpreted in the form of a hardware itself as a hardware logic. This support is called as Jezzel support. Is this understood, people? Please get back to me what I have explained. Please confirm, is this understood or not? What I have explained about Jezzel support? Okay, so I'm going to explain it once again in a different way. All of you know Windows operating system. All of you know Linux operating system. Okay. All of you know Android operating system. Yes or no? All of you are aware about Windows operating system, aware about Linux operating system, aware about Android operating system, aware about Mac operating system. Mac operating system, that is Macintosh operating system for Apple based computers or CPUs. Are you all aware about it? Yes. Okay. So if you're all aware about these various operating systems, namely Windows operating system, Microsoft Windows operating system, next is Linux operating system, Macintosh operating system, abbreviated as Mac, and Android operating systems. Fine. Now, all of you are aware about a programming language called as Java programming language. Yes or no? Okay, all of you are aware about Java programming language. I'm not saying that you know the language. I'm saying that you have heard about the language. So all of you are aware about Java programming language. Now, the question is, Java programming language is what we call a complete object-oriented programming language. It's a fully object-oriented programming language. Is it true or false? So Java programming language is is a true object-oriented programming language as compared to C++, which you people have learned. Just a moment, please. So Java programming language is a complete or true object-oriented programming language. Unlike the C++ programming language that you have learned through Vector, which is not a pure object-oriented language. It is a partially object-oriented language. So the reasons for that partially being object-oriented language, one of the reasons is it supports pointers. And because of pointers present in C++, this will have a breach in the security feature of the language. So because of the presence of pointers, data of variables can be corrupted through the use of the pointers. So since there is a security breach, there is a possibility of a security breach in the case of C++, that makes it to be called as a not a pure object-oriented programming language. Whereas in contrast in Java, you have a good level of security, much better than C++, and it does not support the concept of pointers. So encapsulated variables cannot be simply corrupted like that, like the way you do it in C++. Hence, that is called as a fully object-oriented programming language, fully secured programming language. Is it understood so far? Is this point understood? Okay. Now, when we write a source code in Java, we compile the source code in Java using a Java compiler, and the Java compiler will generate an executable file, which is called as the Java executable file. A Java executable file consists of bytecodes, which we call it as Java bytecodes. So just imagine, I'm just trying to annotate over here. Okay. I hope you can see the annotation. Let us just imagine that this is a Java executable file, which is called as .java. Okay, let us say t.java. T is the name of the file, dot indicates extension, and Java is an extension indicating that this is a Java executable file. So a Java executable file, which is the executable file of the source code of the Java, will have a set of byte codes. Let us say this is a byte code, 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 this is the byte code, byte code. Byte codes are nothing but numbers. So these are all byte codes, numbers. Every number in the Java programming language is having a defined meaning, okay, a predefined meaning. Every number in the Java executable file, Java programming language is having a defined meaning for what operation has to be performed. I hope you are getting it. A Java executable file consists of Java bytecodes. Java bytecodes are numbers. Every number in the Java programming language executable file is having some defined meaning, predefined meaning. So this number implies this operation, this number implies another operation, this number implies another operation, like that. Every number is having a predefined meaning. We call it as Java bytecodes. So with this predefined meaning already there, when the Java executable file has to run on a Windows platform, we need an interpreter to run that Java executable file on a Windows platform. That is called as JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So the Java Virtual Machine converts what we call the Java executable file, which is a set of bytecodes, into platform dependent operations. So it converts the Java executable file, which is a set of bytecodes, into Windows platform specific level operations. The same Java executable file as it is can also be made to run on Linux if on Linux operating system we have also installed the JVM. So the same executable file can run on Linux, where the Linux JVM will interpret the Java bytecodes into Linux platform specific operations. The same JVM can run on Mac operating system, because the Mac operating system will interpret the Java bytecodes into Mac platform specific operations. So what happens? Since the same executable file can be made to execute on a JVM present in Linux, or on a JVM present in Windows, or on a JVM present in Mac, or on a JVM present, let us say, in Android, we call it as Java programming language supports platform independent execution. Okay, Java programming language, or you can say Java executable file can execute on platform independent. It is platform independent executable file. Have you followed this statement? Have you people followed this statement? Please confirm. So Java executable file can run on any platform provided that platform contains a JVM, Java Virtual Machine Interpreter. But a JVM on Windows platform, or a JVM on Linux platform, or a JVM on Mac platform is 100% software. Whereas when we talk about a JVM on ARM architecture, which is when we are talking about JVM on an ARM architecture. Now, an ARM architecture may run Linux OS, an ARM architecture may run a Windows OS, or an ARM architecture may run what we call Windows OS. It may run an Android OS. So when we talk about a JVM on an ARM architecture, many of the bytecodes of the Java programming language have already been defined as a hardware logic in the ARM architecture. Whereas in the case of an x86 architecture or Apple computer architecture, I repeat, in the case of an x86 architecture or an Apple computer architecture, the JVM is 100% software. But in the ARM architecture, the JVM is not 100% software, because the JVM is already implemented in the ARM architecture as a hardware by 70%. Only 30% of the Java bytecodes of Java programming language are implemented in the form of a software called as JVM interpreter in ARM architecture. That means on x86 architecture or on Apple architecture, JVM is 100% software. On ARM architecture, JVM is 30% software and 70% already implemented as a hardware in the ARM architecture. So the level of interpretation in ARM is less, and the speed of a Java application in ARM will be more faster, because it takes less time to interpret in ARM, because the hardware JVM is already there in the ARM architecture. This type of support of having a hardware JVM on ARM architecture up to around 70%, of the Java bytecodes or Java language is present in the form of a hardware interpreter is called as Jazelle support. Jazelle, Jazelle support. So because of that, a Java application on ARM can run more faster as compared to the Java application on x86 architecture or Mac architecture, because it has to interpret all the bytecodes as a platform specific operation and then execute. But here in ARM, already the bytecodes are understood by the ARM architecture. So interpretation is not much required, less level of interpretation. The level of interpretation required will only be for 30% of the Java bytecodes. Why? Because the 30% of the Java bytecodes indicate different input and output devices used on ARM architecture for different embedded systems. In a desktop computer, the input and output devices are standard. Standard input device is keyboard, let us say mouse. Standard output devices, say monitor, say floppy drive, or say hard disk drive, pen drive, like that. But the input output devices in an ARM based embedded system may vary a lot. Hence, for that, 30% of the JVM has to be implemented as per the hardware requirement of embedded systems in ARM based embedded systems. Okay, somebody is raising a question after a long time. HE7M10 has raised a question. Is it all ARM models support Jezzel or specific ARM models support only? Very, very good question. Very, very beautiful question, HE7M10. No, all ARM models or ARM implementations, all ARM models or ARM implementations do not support JVM, Jezzel. Only certain ARM models or implementations support JVM. So you have to consult the nomenclature of the model or the implementation. In that nomenclature of the model or implementation, if there is a letter J, that will indicate Jezzel support. If there is a letter J, that will indicate Jezzel support in the nomenclature. For example, if I say ARM720T is a nomenclature, there is no J here, so it does not support Jezzel. ARM7TDMI, there is no J, so it does not support Jezzel. ARM7TDMI-S also does not support Jezzel. So in an implementation, and if you look at the nomenclature, if that implementation nomenclature contains J as a letter in the nomenclature, then it supports Jezzel. Is this understood, people? So that was about the deviations of the ARM architecture from a pure or normal RISC architecture. Everybody just have a reading of those two statements. Okay, guys, did you have a reading of those statements? Now, look at the figure. So the title for this figure is the ARM core data flow model. ARM core data flow model. Since we are talking about the ARM7 core, so for the ARM7 core is a von Neumann core, and for this ARM7 core, which is a von Neumann core, von Neumann based implementation. So what is the how the units are connected to the ARM7 core, and this interconnection of the various units connected to the ARM7 core is referred to as the ARM core data flow model, you can say, or figure. And this is the figure. Please observe this figure. I'll be explaining that figure in a couple of minutes after you observe it. So observe it very carefully. What are the different blocks or units present in that? I will explain it in a couple of minutes or less. Okay, guys, I hope you're observing it. People, are you observing it carefully? So the different blocks, one is block is called as the instruction decoder, then the sign extend unit or sign extender. You have the register file block, you have the barrel shifter block, you have the multiply and accumulate unit block, that is MAC unit. Then you have the arithmetic logic unit block, and then you have the address register block, and then the incrementer block. So this set of blocks that you can see refers to the ARM core data flow model. In other words, it's talking about how information flows within the ARM core. A second. Okay, so the ARM core data flow model comprises of, it's talking about how information flows within the core. So you can see here, I'm just trying to annotate here, just a moment. So imagine that you have a memory unit or block over here, a memory unit or block, a memory block or memory unit over there. Apart from memory block or memory unit, it can also refer to what we call IO devices, input output devices, uh, registers, you can say, special function registers. Okay, imagine that this, what I have drawn in red color above, can be either a memory block or unit, or it can also be peripheral block like UART or I2C or SPI peripheral block or unit with special function registers, which are addressable. Same way here also, you can imagine another block over here, which may be a memory block, or it can be what we call a peripheral block. So now information is fetched from the memory block. Let us say information is fetched from the memory block, maybe the code section, and it goes into the instruction decoder for decoding that instruction. That is one type of data flow model. The other type of data flow model is information can be fetched from the data memory, from the code memory. Information can be fetched from the code memory. It may go into the instruction decoder, that would be an instruction. Information can be fetched from the code memory, and it can be treated as a data, which may go into what we call a sign extend unit. It may or may not go into the sign extend unit. So, I mean, it may make use of the feature of the sign extend, or it may not make use of the feature of the sign extend. So the data which is coming from the memory unit over here above, this is memory. Let's call this as IO device. Similarly, let us say memory. Let us call this as also IO device. So information comes from the memory code section, goes into the instruction decoder. That is one way of how data flows. Information comes from the code memory and may go through the sign extend unit, which may make use of the sign extension feature or not. So what is this sign extension? What is instruction decoder? I'm sure all of you know, decoding a opcode fetched from the memory. A sign extend unit can be explained like this. Let me try to explain a sign extend unit. Just hold on. So consider, let us say, a C program in which I give char x is equal to, let us say, char x is equal to 255. And I'm giving here, say, int y equal to x. Now, if I give there printf percentile x, if I give there printf percentile x and put there y, can you people tell me what will be the output of this program? Hello people, are you able to see the three C statements which I have given to you? Hello people, I'm trying to make you understand the functionality of the sign extend unit in the data flow model. ARM core, in the ARM core data flow model, I'm just trying to explain how the sign extend unit functions. Can you please tell me from C language point of view, if char x is given a value of 255 and int x is given a value of int y is given a value of x, a copy of int y is given a value of x, which is a copy of x, printf, what is the output? The answer is wrong. The answer is wrong, people. V19 HE6 M15, I'm sorry, your answer is wrong. Work it out. Your answer is wrong. Please work it out. HE6 D6, also the answer is wrong. Okay, somebody has given the answer. M15 has given the answer as FF, 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 FF. Okay, finally, yes, people. Somebody has given the answer. FF, 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 FF means 4 bytes of FF, 4 bytes. FF repeated 4 times is the answer. Okay, very good. So, why the answer of 4FF? Can you explain? Why the answer of 4FF? Can you explain? Why the answer of 4FF sets? Can you people explain? V19, He6, M15. Anybody who can give me the reason for why the answer will be 4 sets of FF? So the answer to this question is X is a 8-bit variable, Y is a 32-bit variable. So when an 8-bit variable is being assigned to a 32-bit variable, and you can see char X implies default signed character. Char X implies default signed character. So when 8 bits are being assigned to an integer, the magnitude of the 8 bits get copied into the lower byte of the integer variable, but the sign bit of the 8 bits gets extended to the 24 bits of the 32-bit variable. Are you following? The magnitude of the 8 bits of the character variable get written into the lower 8 bits of the integer variable, but the sign bit of the character variable gets extended to the upper 24 bits of the integer variable. Hence, since the sign bit is 1, the 24 bits also become 1s, and the lower 8 bits are also 1s. So the totality is FF, 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 FF. Did you people get this? This is called as sign extension. This operation behind the scenes in the CPU is called as sign extension. Are you following this operation which is happening behind the scenes? CPU is taking care of that. CPU, why it is taking care of that? Because this C programming statements that you have given, when they are given to a C compiler, the compiler chooses the compiler interprets this C language statements into assembly language statements appropriately. So that assembly language statements will be chosen such that the sign extend unit should be used for extending the sign. The sign extend unit should be used or triggered or instructed to extend the sign. So these C statements will be converted into assembly language statements, which will be what we call instructing the sign extend unit to ensure that the sign bit status of the most significant bit of character variable gets extended to the upper 24 bits of the integer variable. That is called as sign extension. Did you people follow this discussion? So if you have followed this discussion, then what will be the answer? If you follow this discussion, what will be the answer now? I have made a small change in the program, and you said people, I'm hoping people have followed the discussion. If not followed, you can ask. I have made a small change in the program. Can you tell me what will be the output for this program change? Wrong answer. He6D3, He7M14. I'm sorry, the answer is wrong. Can you tell me the correct answer? Because I'm telling you the answer is wrong. Yes, now the answer is correct. He7B6 and He7P2, the answer is correct. So again, the reason is same. The most significant bit of 128 character is 1. So that is getting extended to the upper 24 bits of the integer variable. Hence, the final answer is showing you as FFFFF80. Did you people get this? This is called as sign extension. Now, once again, just hold on. Yes, please. Can you now tell me what is the answer for this? Correct. Now the answer will be 80. The reason why now the answer will be 80 is because this time the most significant bit status of 128, which is 1, does not get extended to the upper 24 bits of the y variable. Will not get extended. Extended in the sense most significant bit is 0 anyway. So 0 getting extended is of no meaning. Hence, the sign extension does not happen over here. So you can see these are statements of the C programming language which will be interpreted by the compiler to choose the set of instructions to trigger sign extension operation or not perform sign extension operation. Either trigger the set of operations to perform sign extension or use instructions which do not perform sign extension. Have you people got how a sign extension unit can function? I may choose to use a sign extend unit to perform sign extension. I can ignore not to go for sign extension at all. Is it followed? Please confirm. So that was a discussion about what we call the unit called as sign extend unit. So information comes from the code section, goes through the sign extend unit. It may perform sign extension, it may not perform sign extension. It all depends on the type of instruction being used during the data being taken from the memory and passed to a register via sign extend unit. It may use sign extension feature, it may not use sign extension, depends on the instruction we choose to use. So there are instructions which will trigger the architecture to perform sign extensions. There are instructions which will not go for sign extensions. Next, you have register file. So we discussed there are 37 registers in the ARM core. Out of 37 registers, we can access only up to 16 registers in a mode of operation. Out of these 16 registers, which are numbered from R0 to R15, R0 to R15 registers are the 16 registers. So these set of 16 registers which can be accessed by the ARM in a particular mode, in any mode of operation, maximum, is called as register file. So register file is that set of registers which can be accessed in any mode of operation, which is a maximum of 16 registers numbering from R0 to R15. So any register in this register file may be treated as one source operand register, namely generically named as Rn. Another register in this register file can also be treated as a source operand register called as Rm register. And these two source operand registers, Rm and Rn register, may go through what we call a bus A or a bus B. If it goes through a bus A, it may directly go to the ALU. Similarly, if Rm goes through bus B, it may go through the help of a barrel shifter to the ALU, and both the contents of these registers will be operated upon arithmetically as per the arithmetic logic unit operation, or else one content of the register Rm goes through the barrel shifter and gets shifted, left shift or right shift, or left rotate or right rotated, and then its value being applied to the ALU for arithmetic logic into operation with Rn register's value. The other thing is the value of Rn register or Rm and Rm register may go through another unit called as a MAC unit. MAC stands for multiply and accumulate unit. So multiply and accumulate unit is a type of hardware unit through which we can accomplish multiplication. We can accomplish multiplication along with addition in a single operation itself. Normally in 8051, we can multiply two numbers, and after multiplying, if I want to add the result of the multiplication to a third number, then I have to go for addition instruction. So multiplication, after multiplication, use addition instruction. But here in the ARM architecture, I can do multiplication as well as addition in a single instruction. This is possible because of the presence of the MAC unit. So the MAC unit supports a kind of instruction through which with the help of the MAC unit, the ARM core supports a type of instruction where I can accomplish multiplication along with addition in a same instruction itself, where the size of the instruction will be 4 bytes and the time taken for that instruction to do multiplication as well as addition will be about 1 clock cycle. So in 1 clock cycle, I can complete addition with multiplication, and that is the processing capability and power of the ARM architecture through the help of the MAC unit, multiply and accumulate unit. MAC here stands for multiply and accumulate unit. MAC in TCP/IP stands for media access control. So do not confuse media access control with multiply and accumulate unit. Is this understood, people? Please confirm, or if you have any doubts, please ask. I'm waiting for any queries or doubts if you have related to this discussion of MAC. Size of MAC. Okay, a MAC unit is used for performing multiplication along with addition. So when you're going to multiply, we can multiply one register which is 32-bit with another register which is 32-bit, and the maximum value that can be generated out of a 32-bit multiplication can be up to 64 bits. So you can say the size of the MAC unit can go up to, the size of the buffering capability of the MAC can go up to 64 bits. Okay, V19HE7C5. Okay, so the registers of register file each are 32-bit. When we multiply two 32-bit registers, the result can maximum go up till 64-bit. Hence, the size of the MAC buffering capability of a result is up to 64 bits. So that was about the MAC unit. ALU, anyway, you people know. Barrel shifter also I've explained. Next, you have what we call the address register. So address register is any register inside the ARM core which can hold an information which will be treated as an address, which may be incremented. See, for example, if I take program counter as a register in the ARM core, program counter is a register which points to some location. So program counter register which holds a value, that value it is holding is referring to a location it is pointing to, and that location that is being pointing to, that is it is pointing to, it will get incremented in order to fetch the next instruction from the next location. So program counter points to a current location, an instruction is fetched, and automatically the program counter gets incremented to point to the next location to fetch the next instruction. So an address register can be a register like a program counter. If not a program counter, it can also be other registers which can hold a value which is pointing to, let us say, a stack. It can hold a value which is pointing to a stack. And when I perform stack operations like what we call the act of pushing or the act of popping. I'm not exactly saying that you use the mnemonic push and pop, but you are going to perform an action like pushing and popping. So whenever you're performing a pushing and popping like operation, the stack pointer gets affected by incrementing or decrementing. Okay, gets affected by incrementing or decrementing. So in that kind of situations, if the stack pointer is getting affected in terms of incrementing, then the stack pointer register is also treated as an address register, and that address register has to increment for what we call the stack operations. Hence, we have an incrementer unit which takes care of incrementing the content of the address register, and again updates that address register with the updated or new content. That is how information flows in the ARM core flow model. And once the information has been updated in the address register, then from the address register, the information can be sent out to the memory unit or the IO device, or the information can be brought from a general purpose, from a register file, and be given to what we call a memory unit or an IO device. This is how information flows in the ARM core data flow model. Did you people get this? The result of the information present in an address register can be sent out for addressing a memory location, can be sent out for addressing an IO device special function register. Information from a register file can also be sent out as an address information. Hello people, did you understand this discussion of the ARM core data flow model? Please confirm. Hello people, did you understand the discussion? Can I go ahead now? Yes, stack pointer which points to stack address location is also incremented by the incrementer, correct? Very good question. So when we pop, so it's decrement. Good question. V19H7D2. So when we perform stack operations will be the stack pointer will be incremented by the incrementer. Yes, it will be done by that. Okay. So what happens in 8051 architecture is, in the case of an 8051 architecture, whenever we perform a push operation and the stack pointer increments, that incrementing operation is being done by the arithmetic logic unit itself. HE7D12, are you understanding? When we perform a push operation, the stack pointer gets incremented. That incrementing operation is being performed by the arithmetic logic unit. Here in the ARM architecture, when we perform a push operation, the increment is done not by the arithmetic logic unit, but it is done by an incrementer. But as you say, decrement operation. So when we perform a pop operation, a decrement will be taking place. So there is no decrementer over here. So since there is no decrementer over here, it implies that that decrementer operation will be performed by arithmetic logic unit. So the presence of a incrementer unit helps in speeding up the dependency between ALU and what we call incrementing operation. Maybe there may be a kind of instruction in the ARM core. I cannot give you the example of the instruction right now, but when we come to learn about the instruction, there may be a kind of instruction in the ARM architecture where the ALU operation has to be taking place at the same time with incrementing operation. Are you following, people? ALU will be busy doing its operation and incrementer also will be busy doing its operation. So both these operations can concurrently take place without dependency between them. In this kind of situations, the incrementer and ALU will come into the picture. So that was the discussion about the ARM core data flow model. Okay, guys, so it's about 11:57. Let's round it up to 12. So giving you a break, we meet after 10 minutes. Okay, guys, let's meet after 10 minutes. Take a break. We meet after 10 minutes and complete the I2C demonstration. I2C